And then I read Ram Dass's Living Gita or whatever. I forget.
That's a good one too.
That's a good one. But
Right.
It missed all the shenanigans.
Don't worry, there'll be further shenanigans. So this interesting thing about this mantra, and I discovered a treasure trove of recordings from various people. Like John Juilliard was here at one point in time, Kunda Styles came several times, Vamadeva, who can't remember his name, came. Vamadeva was the mantra guy. Remember the Shakti mantras and the books and all that? Yeah. He looked like Mickey. Yeah, I can remember. So I found this treasure trove of stuff, and one of the things I just found was I was like, where did I first learn or hear about this mantra, like this Shakti mantra? And Mukunda Styles, who wrote a book called Structural Yoga Therapy, used to come about once a year, and he would teach about how to use yoga to physiologically, methodically, increase range of motion. And of course, he was deeply spiritual. So he would open class with the Om Sahana Bhavatu mantra. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that was the first time I really heard it. It was probably 2005, 2006. And so, because one of the things that's happening is that, it's Om Sahana Bhavatu. So you see that A with the line over it. Sahana Bhavatu. Sahana Bhunaktu. And so you got to get the K's and the T's in there. So Bhunaktu. And then Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamas. And that I is actually short. It's kind of a little weird. Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvashavahai. So I was like, why am I stumbling over the fourth line? Because Mukunda stumbled over the fourth line. And that's why I learned it. And I was like, and I relearned it since, but I was like, all of a sudden am I stumbling?
Did you find the recording and you saw
I just heard it. No, I found it. I found the recording of it. Yeah. It was really bad recording.
Well,
It was
2005.
It was on my phone. It was on my phone in 2005. This is before the iPhone. Yeah. Well, they could record back then. They had voicemail. So. Yeah.
That was fancy.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll kick it off with that mantra. But I realized there should be a recording in class 0, but what I'll do is there's a dedicated folder on the drive just for mantra recordings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that there's a copy of all of the meditations and recordings just in that one folder so you can have it. Because one of the meditations we're going to do today is called the surrender meditation. And it actually walks through the chakras. So it's a longer one. And so I just want to make sure that I'm just going to centralize everything there. So just look at that directory, the mantra directory, and say mantra meditation. So I'll make sure there's copies everywhere. But just know it's all in that one folder so you can find it.
Would you, I like it when you resend the link. Will you resend it to me? Then you're scrolling up trying to click it.
Yeah, totally. Totally get it. Okay, and then we'll do our own Ganesha. Okay. So I'll do it together. Om Sahanam Bhavatu Sahanam Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvashavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Ganesha So 3 things. So Gangadhar, I have to tell a quick story since you this time you were at Kashi, Florida. So the last time I saw him in the styles, he was actually really sick. And it was 2016, we're down in Florida, and we're sitting, we've never been to Florida, we're in my house, and we're in the round tables where they like feed everybody, right? And we're hanging out in the big tables, and Tara, his wife, brings him down, sits him down, and then walks away. Now, Mukunda and I had a very deep relationship, and what was interesting though is that I didn't see him very often. So the minute he saw me, I was sitting with another guy, and the guy was like, "Man, I'm reading this book about like the sutras," and he's like, "Have you heard of this guy?" And Mukunda's sitting right there, by the way. He said, he looks at me and he goes, "Have you heard of this guy, Mukunda Styles?" I was like, "That guy? Man, he's super cagey and cantankerous, and his translation from Sanskrit is really questionable." Right now, right? Now Mukunda is sitting right there looking right at me, right? And Tara walks up right as I say the end of it, and you can see that she's like slightly offended because she doesn't know me, right? And she just walks in and she hears, "Yeah, that Mukunda Styles guy. Oh my God, he's like cagey and cantankerous, and his translation is questionable at best." So she takes a breath in, and you can see it kind of like she's like it has hit her. She's about to like say something like, "Who are you? Do you know that he's sitting right here?" and all this other stuff. And he starts cackling. Now he's fragile, he's like hunched over, he's like weak. It's kind of the last time we'd seen him. But he starts cackling. He's like, which was this unique laugh that only he had. So even when he was like in the peak of vitality, that's the way he laughed. And it was just hilarious. And I'll never forget sitting across the table from him because that was the last time I saw him. And of course, I talked to him afterwards. But I was like, "It's cagey and cantankerous." And this translation of Sanskrit is like, and never forget him sitting across from me. But one of the things he taught me, just to mention, is that the Om sound itself, is like the seed sound. It's almost like, the Bible is like first there was the word. It's very interesting that like there's books in Hinduism that start the exact same way the Bible starts, right? It's like first there was consciousness. There was the word, because even in Hebrew, in the Bible, it doesn't translate into the word very cleanly. It translates more into meaning and meaningfulness and consciousness, right? So going back to Om, one of the things he would say is that when you do an Om, you're like, "Oh." Where did that go? Like it didn't just say, it wasn't like a, "Oh." What was the difference? Did you hear it? Higher, right? So the point is that Om is very externalized. And Om is meant to be brought inside, especially when you're doing it just for yourself. Obviously, you can apply it for different uses. But when you're doing an invocation for the self, the mouth has to close and wrap itself around the sound, and then the sound goes down. So earlier, I was like, "Oh." Now, if you notice, I was pushing all of the sound in the breath down versus externalizing. So when you do Om, practice, play with it a little bit, and see what the sound sounds like when you bring the actual AUM, kind of like our transliteration of it, right, into like the space down into the heart. You can go to the heart, you can go all the way down to the earth, like whichever you want. But practice bringing it in. And then if it's for puja or prayer, your Om might be joining other Oms. And so it may not be as internal. It may be more of a, "Oh." But notice my mouth never closes. which is what it did
When
last
I
time.
hear it that way, it feels like, because that's how I usually say it, it feels like I'm flattening everything out.
Say again?
It feels like a neutralizer.
Like a neutralizer.
Like I'm flattening all the ups and downs. It's just like making everything like a reset. That's how it feels to me when I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think that's great, actually. Because in a way, I jokingly say that you're kind of like tainting or infecting everything with this pure sound of consciousness. So just something to keep in mind, because in level 3 of this class, we really get into the Sanskrit a lot more. Level 2 of this class, by the way, is just a deeper continuation of the story with some Sanskrit. Level 3 is where we're like, oh, we're going to peel back on the Sanskrit, talk about it. We're going to mispronounce it. We're going to pronounce it correctly. We're going to go through all the variations. But that one is more of a dissection. But the reason we teach it that way is we want you to have the meaning of the story at a deeper level before you learn the Sanskrit, because the Sanskrit becomes a distraction. People get wrapped up in pronouncing it correctly, right? It's like if you were going to read Don Quixote, right? But you were like, oh, I want to read it in the original Spanish. But really, it'd be better for you to understand where the story goes and then translate it, because then you would be able to understand what they were trying to do with the story. So that's how we set it up. So, and we'll talk about that, because actually, I was asked to put everything on the schedule for February to May. So that's when we'll do level 2. So,
I never heard that. And people should.
yeah. Because I say level 2, we still have 12 chapters of this Gita to go through, do we not? At level 1. All right, so let's talk about that. So when I last saw them, when our brave warriors were last together. Okay, so it's like, what has happened thus far? Okay, Gangadhar, you're up.
Hey, am I narrating?
That's right, you're narrating. Okay, so who is going to play the sage? Who wants to do the sage? Who wants to do Sanjaya? The blind sage.
Is it based on?
You know what? Let's just Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda's perfect.
Not the sage.
Yeah, do the sage. Okay, let's see. We're gonna have you're gonna do Arjuna, because that's actually Arjuna's symbol. That's something representing Arjuna. So you're gonna do Arjuna, and you're also gonna do King Dhritarashtra.
Okay.
You know, little
Big king.
King, not big bad guy, little King. And then we'll have you do Krishna. Since
You mean?
yes, yours. Yeah, okay. All right. So here's one other thing I want to tell you. There's 2 things that I have purposely withheld from you. One is that everybody who was listed at the beginning of chapter 1, all the names of the armies and all this, I want you to know something. You probably know this already. They all died. Every single person on this battlefield dies.
Spoiler.
Just so you know, the Mahabharata, right? We're in the middle of an epic. Every one of these people dies. Now, here's the other thing to know. When they came in the battlefield, right before this happened, the very last thing that occurred was that the Pandavas said, you know, we'll take the villages, we'll retreat if you give us the villages. Big Bad D, who's the narcissistic son on the battlefield, his reply was, not only will I not retreat, but wherever you go on the face of this earth, I will hunt you down and kill you and every member of your family. So now it's not even about war, and it's not like a formal introduction of the battlefield. He's now said, I will kill every one of you, no matter what the outcome is of this battle. I will hunt you down and destroy everything about you. Right? So now we've really shifted, because before, you know, you could tell, because I was in the same space when I read the book. It was like, wait, what? Why are we fighting? Just run away. Are you guys fighting over land? Oh my God, how many times does that happen? Like, just leave. Just go live happy lives. Go to Sri Lanka, ask them to take you in, and go live happy lives down there. That's not an option. Because Big Bad D, just as background, the son was basically says, I'm going to commit fratricide, genocide, call it what you will, some kind of side, right? Where he's going to kill everyone. So there's no recourse at this point. If they leave, they're still gonna have to fight later. Right? So I just want to frame that up because I usually say that for about the fourth class for you to know, because up until the time, there's a huge moral dilemma. But then when you find out that you are truly dealing with madness, then you realize that you have no choice but to come up with a solution. Now, I disagree necessarily that fighting is the only option, but for the purposes of this story, fighting, let me rephrase that. Fighting on the battlefield here is not the only option, but fighting is the only option. There is going to be some sorts of conflict. There is no avoiding it. Whether they come at him directly or they come at him sideways, they're going to be forced to confront big bad D at some point in time. Okay, good. All right. So, King Dhritarashtra. That's you. Stand up. You got your horns on. You don't even need Arjuna. Okay, Gangadhar. What does the king say?
Tell me, Sanjaya, tell me what is happening at the field called Kurukshetra, where my family, the Kauravas, and my brother's family, the Pandavas, gathered to fight.
Okay, it's me.
That's you.
Do I read it?
No, Gangadhar's gonna do it. All right, give us Sanjaya.
Oh, you got it, Dar.
Gangadhar.
Wait, am I, okay. Prince Duryodhana, oh my gosh, I can't pronounce it. Duryodhana, your oldest son, spoke to his teacher Drona, saying, "Look at all these famous people assembled for battle. Our army is unlimited in size and commanded by the legendary warrior, our grand uncle Bhishma. Their army is small and is commanded by one of the Pandava brothers, Bhima. In their army is my cousin, Prince Arjuna, with his charioteer Krishna." And this is what Arjuna said to his charioteer.
There we go. Perfect. Okay. Oh, Krishna, drive my chariot between the two armies. Right? I want to see who is there. I'm going to do Sanjaya. So then Krishna drove the magnificent chariot between the two armies and said, "Look, Arjuna, here they all are gathered for battle." Then Arjuna said, all right, Gangadhar, give it to us. What does he say?
"How can I fight these great people? It doesn't make any sense. They are blood relatives and good people. Just thinking about it weakens my resolve. It makes my mouth dry up and gives me the shakes. Even my hair stands on end. I can't believe any good will come of this war. I will not do it."
Well done. There. Then Arjuna, overwhelmed by grief, threw aside his bow and arrow and falls silent and sat back in his chariot. All right, and then Krishna, what's Krishna do? Krishna smiles and he says, well, they really knew how to cut you off right at the cliffhanger, didn't they? Now, it's kind of cool, by the way, that we've got our own Sanjaya with Gangadhar, who is literally like a couple hundred miles away, who is remotely watching the battlefield and viewing, right? Right? And really caring. Good. Okay, now, switching roles just a little bit. Okay, so you're now going to be Krishna. You're now going to be Arjuna. Okay, I'm going to switch roles for a second. Okay.
I think they should switch props.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, switch props. Yeah, I gotta do it. Okay. Now, Krishna. Can you read? Yeah, go ahead.
Sincerely, Prince Arjuna, but your sorrow has been caused. The wise breathe neither the living nor the dead. There has never been time when you and I or any of these people on the battlefield have not existed. And there will never be a time when we stop existing. The spirit yourself cannot be punctured by weapons, and fire cannot burn it. Water does not wet it, and wind cannot dry it. It is infinite, everlasting, and invisible. Knowing this, you should not grieve. But even if you believe that your spirit yourself could die, why would you grieve? After all, death is as inevitable as birth. Since it is unavoidable, why get upset? Just do it. Act If you do not participate in this battle, you will be violating the Dharma, which is your purpose for being. Those people who lack the resolution to do what is before them, the decision of life, complicated and difficult to make. However, when you overcome the confusion of the physical world, you will experience a kind of unity with all life and peace and clarity.
Excellent. Okay. And Gungadar, can you hear that? All that? Did you hear that?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, just want to make sure it's still clear. Okay, Arjuna.
I would like to know about people who have achieved that kind of peace. I want to know how they live and speak.
All right, please continue.
My question,
You're Krishna.
these people.
You are Krishna on so many levels, Jack.
These people are not actually greed, nor by lust or fear. They are mediators, and they are able to be good fortune and bad fortune. Even though they live in the world and enjoy living in the world, they are not overpowered by it. They are not overwhelmed by their senses, which crave for certain things and certain experiences. They know how to step back and observe life as it is. Arjuna, you already know that this is doing something over and over again. You become attached to that thing. And when you're attached to that thing, you begin to want to possess it. And when you can't get what you desire, anger and frustration rise. And these cloud judgments. To step back from these influences and achieve peace requires committed daily spiritual practice.
Ooh. What do you think about that? Did I answer your question, Arjuna? Are you gonna pick up your bow now? You just did a little thing with the doll and raised the I'm sure you could see that in your camera. That's funny. Okay, all right, let's go back. Okay, now, we're Krishna, and now you are Arjuna. Oh, yeah, that's right. We just want those props. That's the problem. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Gangadhar, you're going to read for Arjuna.
Okay. You are confusing me, and you seem to be suggesting contradictory advice. On one hand, you say meditation and study are the way to go. Yet, on the other hand, you say that I should go ahead and fight. If you consider knowledge to be better than action, why do you want me to engage in this horrible war? What must I do to achieve peace? Can you please give me a straight answer?
Trishul, do you mind reading Trishul? Trishul, do you mind reading Trishula's part?
At the beginning of time, I announced two pathways to peace. The pathway of contemplation, right thought, and the pathway of selfless service, right action. However, it is not possible for any creature to stop action, even taking care of your body with action. It is selfish action that causes all of the troubles. So I'm recommending that you act selflessly, which means without any thought of personal gain. Selfless action leads to peace because it is holy. Do your work with the welfare of others. Not only will it lead to peace, but it will inspire other countless others to do the same. As for me, I can stop. If I did, creation would stop and everything would cease to exist. Oh, and another thing to keep in mind is that you're not the doer of any action anyway. Instead, you are the knower and the witness. As a result of your knowing, all actions are really performed through subtle interaction forces. When you think it is you who are doing something, that is when you get attached to stuff. Not everybody understands. So to simplify and say, do everything for me, and to do it all without any expectations. In this way, you can be sure to escape the complex web of causes and effects, and you can concentrate on doing your duty for me. Discover what it is that you need in your future, and dedicate yourself to it as a supposed to.
I just want to emphasize that one statement at the end. Discover what is in harmony with your own nature. They are not asking you to follow any path except for the one that is aligned with who you are, how you were born, right? And in a sense, how you choose to be, right? Because we're not just going to give up to destiny. Okay, and then it says, and dedicate yourself to it as a service to me. So discover what form of selfless service, what form of the things they're asking is in alignment with your nature, and then dedicate yourself to that as a service to the divine, right? So to make sure, because sometimes it seems like, well, why is this recommended like a specific path? I'm going to believe in Krishna. They're not asking that. They're saying, look, follow who you are, figure out how service can align to who you are, do that service and dedicate it to whatever form of the divine it speaks to, right? Or higher power, whatever it is. But the point being is that it's individuated. All right, Arjuna, don't get done.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
There we go. What makes us so selfish? It is almost like there is an independent power forcing us to act against our own nature.
Good.
What seems to be forcing people to act in selfish, even evil ways, is really the accumulation of desires coming together, a strong, irresistible appetite for self-satisfaction. These desires have their roots in our senses, and sense information can be misleading. Senses are truly powerful, but more powerful than senses is the mind. And more powerful than the mind is the will for your intellect. And that which above it is the real self, the part of you which is not deluded by the information of the sense world.
Good. Okay. All right. So everyone have a seat. Let's talk about this for a second. Okay. So one, how great that Arjuna has a relationship. You know, one of the things that is prevalent in many, many traditions is that the student unlocks the knowledge in the teacher. Right. And, you know, Hollywood even plays that up a little bit where it's like, you know, I'm teaching more, I'm thinking about it. The next thing you know, like the reluctant kind of taciturn teacher takes on the reluctant, the student. And it's like, and then, you know, the student asks or presents themselves in a specific way that even causes the teacher to grow. Right. And so that myth is prevalent the world over, which is that good students will ask questions, will be actively involved in their progress, and will experiment and play with things. And in a way, they'll even challenge the teacher. On Monday, my birthday's in a couple of weeks, and I went to see Joe Satriani, who was this Emmy Award-winning guitar player from like the 80s. And he was playing at Atlanta Symphony Hall. So it's not like it was a huge venue. There's only like maybe 1,000 people there. So I took my son to see him. What was interesting is that every major guitar player from the 80s, like Steve Vai and everybody else, and even some jazz players, were all trained by Joe Satriani. And so he never talks about it. But one of his bandmates got on stage and talked about the history of Joe during one of the intermissions, right as we were leaving the mission. And I guess my point in kind of saying all that is that when Joe has had the rare interview about Steve Vai and his great guitar players who have been with him, that he would say, he's like, it would be unbelievable. He's like, I would come up, and by the way, the guitar is in his hand, and he would play something ridiculously complex. And I just learned this, and Steve Vai had already caught up to me, and I was his teacher. So I was having to teach him the thing that I had literally just mastered 3 days ago. And I had to move on to the next thing because he was right behind me, right? And you don't get a sense from Joe that it was like, oh, I didn't want to lose to him. He was like, I want to be able to give value to this guy. And so he's like constantly pushing the edge. Or Stanley Clarke, who was the first bassist to play the Philharmonic, like by himself. He was the first solo bassist. And Stanley Clarke was an infamous, well-known jazz bassist, right? He would talk about playing with Chick Corea and Return to Forever, these complex jazz licks that literally he could not play 30 seconds prior to getting on stage.
My God.
Like he had just figured it out. And then they go on and they play the song, and he had just figured out how to play the lick because they were so complex that even a master like himself was having to like grow into this whole thing, but he said that's what Chick Corea did for him, is Chick Corea was always challenging him to go up and above, right? Good students, right? Good teachers. So it's great that they have this relationship. Now, what do you think about the two pathways to peace? What's the difference between knowledge, as they put it, and action?
Knowledge doesn't affect like anything around you per se, and action does. Unless it's through perception of things, but that doesn't affect other people directly without action.
True, and I will point out something that to this day still fascinates me, and so it's been debunked and it's got reasserted, is that, you know, when you get a large group of meditators in the city, the crime rate goes down. The crime rate goes down. So the transcendental meditators did a bunch of studies where they got a large group of people to meditate on peace, and the crime rate went down, and then they stopped, crime rate goes back up, and they did it again. Like there was a direct correlation between whether they were meditating in large groups or not. Larry Dossey has studied this, and then who's the guy who's doing it now? Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza also studies these things. So to your assertion, it may mean that if more of us were peaceful and radiated peace, like in a sense, what's that famous quote? If everyone swept their own front porch, the whole world would be clean. Unfortunately, it's not technically true. It was a nice thought. But if we were all carrying peace in our hearts, that the majority of us were, would that knowledge, would that existence dampen down the disturbance and the violence and the chaos? We don't know. That's not a branch of study that we really want to undertake. Most, I think, people, particularly in the Western world, will say no, action is the thing that matters, right? It's kind of like the thing of saying I love you versus all the little things you do for the person that you care about, right? That's really how it gets communicated, you know, even if it's just showing up. So, but here Arjuna is like rightfully asking the question, it's like, do you want me to stop and meditate here? Because we're in the middle of a war. I'm gonna die. This ain't gonna help. Right? And then he's like, look, now you're advocating that you want to get in action. But you just said that knowledge, that existence, like being with God in an internal space, is more powerful than action. That's what Arjuna is thinking that you heard, right? And then what does Krishna say? He says it's not possible for any creature to stop action. And he even goes on, by the way, he makes a reference, he says, even I can't stop action, which this puts him more in the Shiva Nataraj space. So that dance, that aspect of God does, Shiva Nataraj, that's the dance of creation. So Krishna's going to shift it a little bit into Shiva Nataraj, right? Because Shiva is an aspect of the divine, so he can shift to whatever form he wants to, right? Selfless action that leads to peace because it is holy. Selfless action leads to peace because it is holy. Is that true?
I think so, because, I mean, or could be because of the detachment. And when you're doing it selflessly, you know, not looking for accolades, so you're filling up by giving selflessly. So in essence, like you're making everything around you better. Based on what you just said. So if you're not the doer and you're doing things from a selfless place, then, but I kind of get what he's saying about like, even who is selfish, because it talks about you got to take care of yourself,
Right.
Which is selfish. But in a way, maybe you could even be that selflessly, because if you're taking care of yourself, well, you know you want to do yourself. I don't know.
Perfect. You just actually delineated a conundrum that we all have. If I say to you, don't think about lemons, don't think about lemons, don't think about lemons, don't think about lemons, don't think about it, don't think about lemons, don't think about their juiciness and how they make your mouth water. Don't think about it. Don't do it, right? That doesn't work. If I say, I want you to be selfless. Wait, immediately what happens is we put ourselves into a space of duality, right? Which is also why I like that there's two paths here, which, you know, there's like obviously more than that. Because there's gradations in this path. But the minute we just go, oh, you know what? I'm not gonna think about the ego. I'm not gonna be the doer. I'm not the doer. I'm not the doer. I'm not the doer. Who's the doer? I'm not the doer. And it's like, at that point, it doesn't seem like you're really touching the root end of it. But this is why he goes on to basically say, dedicate yourself. That last line that I brought up in the middle of the whole thing, right here. Discover what is in harmony with your own nature and dedicate it yourself. Right? So to simplify, saying, do everything for me and do it all without expectation. Do everything for me. But then he goes on to say, me, the actions that you do and the me that you're talking to need to be in alignment with who you are. So like, I'm an earth-loving herbalist, nature guy, right? So my religion, if you were to classify it, would be Wiccan. I'm actually Wiccan. That's the closest one that would match me, right? And so my Ishta Devata, my form would be Gaia, would be the earth, right? And my point being in sharing that is that you all want to have your own form. But think about the genius of this. Instead of saying, be selfless, be egoless, do your service, you don't have to do it, you don't have to do it. Instead of putting yourself in opposition with yourself, they say, you know what? Dedicate everything to a third party. A higher idea, a bigger idea. I mean, in truth, the world has only ever changed because a really dedicated group of people wrapped around an idea, a possibility, a vision, and then change it, right? This is no different. We're basically saying, you know what, what if I gave everything to God? Like my Ishta did. Like, what if that was my reason for doing it? Right? Then you don't have the ego schism. Oh no, I'm egoless. I don't have an ego. Even saying that awakens the ego. I don't have an ego. It's like the ego's like, going, oh yeah, right? But then you're like, you know, and then do this in 12 steps as well, right? Where it's like, I am powerless in the face of my addiction. Therefore, I dedicate myself and my actions and my path to my power, please.
I actually go to a 12-step group at the Shambhala Center.
Oh yeah.
And they talk about like, it reminds me of that. It's like there's all this stuff about God in the 12-step books, but they interpret it as like, think of your Dharma as God. And it's like, you can find your Dharma easier when you think of it as that instead of like something that you own.
Indeed. Something you would possess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought it was very interesting. And we talked about it for like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, because like, if you were to say that, because Dharma is a kind of a conflagration of duty, destiny, choice, but like, it has some changeability in it, but there's a path. And you've got a broad river for that path, and you can wander in that path, but that's your Dharma. Yeah, right? Like if someone were to say to me, like, part of the thread of my Dharma right now is to be a father. Right? And so, you know, frequently I would sit there and go, because there's no handbook for the child I got. And I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right path? Are we heading the right direction? But those questions force us to reorient ourselves to where we are in relationship to our actions and what we believe in. Like questions bring us back. It's like looking at a map and going, well, I'm trying to get to Atlanta. Oh, you know what? I thought I was in Macon. I'm actually in Savannah. You're like, oh, big mistake there. And so the point being is that when we choose that third thing, Dharma is a great option, because that is also in a sense of whatever higher power we believe in. Even if it's not a sentient being, it could be love, it could be nature, it could be truth, it could be whatever, right? But what is your path? Because I think so often we fight that path. But in embracing the path, you can get out of the conflict between the ego and the desire to be something more. I had a teacher one time tell me, she said, you see, this whole thing is your being right here. This, like, she was like referring to the floor.
The whole thing is your life.
Your being, your soul, your existence. Your ego is this little speck of dust right here. But it wants you to shove everything through the ego so it can control your actions. If there's one thing we know about the mind as a representation of the ego, the mind is about control. We're constantly seeking for ways to control our environment. Most of us are not running around creating chaos, leaving our cars unlocked, setting random fires, like just randomly, attacking people in the streets. And a lot of that seems violent, but it could be other things where we're, I'm just leaving my car keys in the flying biscuit and come back in a couple hours. Like, we're not doing chaotic things, which is good, because there's a certain inherent chaos to the universe. And so us creating order kind of like helps support that societally as well, right? My point to all of that is that we are naturally inclined, when you see young kids, we're naturally inclined to like kindness, to joy, to bliss. So in a way, what happens is that all the messages and all that stuff kind of starts to stack on us. And what they're saying is that instead of fighting them, don't fight them. Step back from them. Go here. What's here? What do you love? What do you revere? What's important to you? What are you devoted to? Which is literally the next chapter that we're going to talk about, is about devotion and bhakti. So what do you think about the thing that what seems to be forcing people to act in selfish ways is the accumulation of desires coming together in a strong appetite? Do you think that's true? Like to reach
what's
Oh, go ahead, Dr.
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking what seems like a paradox is that you are not the doer, yet some people act selfishly, some people don't, and maybe the selfish people are not the doer either. It's just kind of part of the story. Does that make any sense? It seems like you are not the doer takes away the idea of free will in a way, or it's like what you're doing right now is what you're supposed to do.
That's an interesting perspective. I had a similar conversation with Mom actually a long time ago. And I said, if you're not the doer, then where does choice come into play? And she said to me, you have to choose to not be the doer. And if you do not reaffirm the choice to not be the doer and to choose whatever devotion or whatever it is, she said, that's where the choice is. You're still the one doing the actions. Remember, even here, the exhortation is not necessarily not to do things. It is not to be attached to the outcome of the doing and to dedicate the choices that you make in the doing to something else. You're not the doer. Doesn't mean that you don't do. It means that you do not get to associate the results of the actions to you. You have to let it go, right? You have to do the thing and be detached from the outcome. Now, I find this funny because the tighter you are about the outcome, the more likely you are to fail. I'll give you a good example. Let's say you're going to go take a test. This test is very important to you. Your career's on the line. If you fail the test, you're going to lose a year's worth of work. So this test starts to pile on. Your friends and family are voting for you. Your, father and mother are expecting you to pass because this is your tradition that you pass this test. And if you don't make it, you're gonna have to wait a whole year to take it. So you've lost a year and you're gonna lose the next year because you're gonna have to continue to study it. So all the pressure piles on because you have to please the parents. You have to pass the exam. You are going to lose your time. You are going to lose the next year. You are not going to be able to go forward in your career because you have these plans. You have all of these expectations. But what if you went in and you absolutely just did the best you could and you let the outcome go? Is that not true anyway? That's the only thing you really can do anyway. So let's take all of this other stuff that's being brought into the equation. You're going to walk into a certain space. They're going to give you a piece of paper and you're going to write the answers to questions to the best of your ability. Now that means you will prepare, right? If that's important to you. If you're, right, you will prepare and do all the things, but you're going to let go of the outcome. You're not going to be like in there going, oh my God, It means something about me if I fail. It means something about me if I fail. It means something about me if I fail. What if it was that you, like, in a sense, let's say you failed the test, but it didn't mean anything about you as a human being? Our desire to please our parents, our desire to pass, our desire to be perfect, our desire to not get things wrong, all of that would be accumulated in this irresistible appetite for self-satisfaction. The test is just one example. I feel like I've had that discussion with people about chocolate.
There is no choice.
Are you saying that eating dark chocolate is the choice?
Yes.
I'm sure Mom would agree with you. So, if these desires though have roots in what? What do they say there in the very first sentence, the last paragraph?
Senses, also the roots in our senses, and sense information we use.
It's interesting, right? The senses. So you may be aware that yoga uses the body to enhance the spirit, right? Not just the body, but that's one of the vehicles, right? Ayurveda, right, uses spirit to enhance the body. Ayurveda has a huge spiritual component to it, more than any other system I've ever seen. And then Tantra, though, Tantra is this interesting bridge that says, you know what, let's tame the mind by learning how to control and modulate the senses. It says, you know, we can get to God if we could actually put the mind out of the way. If we could create union and wholeness. We're not gonna discard it because the mind's a part of us. But what if we could create a sense of unity between our senses and the spirit? We could go through all the levels. Think of it like we could align all the chakras at the same time. Right? What if we could do that? So, well, just so you know, most of the time when you tap on the heart, there's a temporary alignment with all 7 chakras. It doesn't last, right? There's a temporary alignment. You can take both hands and tap on the heart. It actually aligns the 7 chakras temporarily. They all get the same rhythm as well. Right? Sorry. Okay, people are like, yeah, I want that. Right? So, do you think that your senses lead you astray? So everyone pick something. So pick something that you feel like it lures you in, like an addiction. Yeah.
Like food, chocolate, I mean, that's a simple thing that you know you may eat something which is not healthy necessarily.
Right. I caught myself the other day. I sat down this is when we got back from Joe's Training. We got back from Joe's Training, and it was like 9:15, 9:30, something like that. And I sat down, and then when I looked up, and I've never done this before to this level, I had scrolled through my phone for an hour. It was like 10:30. And I was like, and it was like, so, I mean, it was entertaining. There was like music stuff in there, and there was the yoga stuff in there. And I just sat there and I just digested my phone on the edge of my bed for an hour. And I looked up, I'm still in my clothes, by the way, from Joe's Country. I haven't brushed my teeth or anything. Usually I'm in bed by 10. And I'm just sitting there and I was like, a whole hour went by. Oh my God, I was impressed. They had completely ensnared my senses. You know, I was getting the sound, I had the visual, right? And I was, in my mind, was just like, man, this algorithm, woo, they're sending me all the videos that I want to watch. And hours of videos, and it went by like I was watching a good movie. Boom. I look up, I'm like, 10:30. I gotta get up in the morning. I'm going to bed. Right? Anybody else?
Yeah, same.
Oh, what do they call it? Doom scrolling. I don't know why they call it doom scrolling. It's not all bad.
You scroll until you.
Is that what they call it? Doom scrolling? That's funny. Yeah, I think there are a lot of artists. Go ahead, do you have one?
Food lately. I'm like craving the taste of food, and my stomach isn't like sending me the signal that I probably should stop eating, and I'll just keep going and eat who knows how much, and I could maybe be in pain or need to take a nap or something. And very much enjoying food lately, and it's good. But I wonder I should probably slow it down a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things they tell you later on in other translations is that whatever choice you're making, embrace it fully. In other words, let's say that you are caught in the cycle of like eating chocolate, which I think is an easy cycle to get caught in. When you do it, instead of feeling guilty about it, just embrace that you chose it. Like say I'm eating chocolate, right? I'm now scrolling through the phone. No judgment. There's nothing wrong with those things. They just lead to outcomes that you don't want. Understand the distinction? Nothing wrong with what you're doing. It's just that it's leading to outcomes that you don't want. That's when we add a second layer to it. We're like, God, I'm a horrible person for this. I have no control. We start putting labels on it, right? And then what happens is that's the ego that does that. And so it puts a layer on the senses, and then another layer, and then another layer. And it makes it actually easier for the sense to pull you in. It makes it easier for the addiction to get in because the layers.
You know, I just had a thought about this. I know we gave some examples about, just some activities, but I think there's some people that are just kind of mean about this. And so I wonder how this desire roots in your senses. How does that like manifest in people just being like mask?
Yeah, can you give me like a very specific situation?
I don't really, I'm just thinking. Like if somebody cuts you off in traffic or something, or if something happens, like people blow me and give the finger, things like that. It's like what part of your senses are their senses? And sometimes I do it too. So my senses, like where does that, this translation of your senses, how does that, make you behave in a not so kind of way?
So when we get in the car, the first thing that happens is that we are now anonymized. We all labor under the solution that we're in the car and no one can really see us. No one can really touch us.
Right.
And everyone's so afraid of getting into an accident with everybody else. We assume that people will not go across the line. Like that's why people will cut you off, because they know you stop. Because nobody wants to get into an accident. And so there's a sense of anonymity. Because if we were standing in line together and someone cut you off in line, that would never happen. Every single person would then rally to say, like, no, you can't cut in line. Get out.
Right.
Like, give us a good reason why you cut in line. Otherwise, you can't just cut in line. Right? But in the car, everyone's equal. Everyone's de-anonymized. And we are trained in our society that like driving in the car is considered a waste of time. We're going from A to B, and most of us don't like it. It is something that we do in between the things to get us where we want to go. It's what eating has become.
Right.
Eating is now something that's in the way of you doing the next thing. And so we only do it because the body requires it. Most of us don't do it consistently. So the body freaks out because it's not getting consistently fed. And so then, next thing you know, it's lunchtime, you haven't eaten anything for lunch, but you had something for breakfast. The body now goes into, oh my God, I'm super hungry. And now anything that is near you is going to get eaten. Doesn't matter the quality. Same thing with the car. The car, we've trained ourselves that the most important thing is that I get to my destination with the minimal number of interruptions as quickly as possible. But the other thing that anonymity provides us is we are now discourteous to each other. If we were no car between us, we would never cut each other off. Most of us would not have the social courage to do that unless you were a bully and thought you could get away with it, right? And that's the problem, is that we all become bullies in the car. And it's a societal training. It is a societal training, right? The only way to shift that would be the way to shift how driving is done, which is why in a way I'm kind of a fan of driverless cars taking over. Because not only is their track record for driving better, but they drive sane. One of the problems I worked on it with the team that did the algorithm for this, is that a car tries to maintain a certain car length from the car in front of it based on the speed. Because the faster you're going, the longer you need to stop. The slower you are, the less you need to stop. We all know this, right? But then people cut in. People cut in.
Right.
People cut in. So the driverless cars are showing high inefficiencies when compared to the drivers, because they won't get in between somebody else in the 60 feet in front of them. Right? They'll maneuver around, right? But they won't cut somebody off because it's dangerous. Because if that person doesn't stop, for example, if they know that the car next to them is a Honda Accord with a braking effort of 120 feet, they're not going to get into that zone. The car's automatically calculating what the stoppage is for all the cars around. So it already knows how long it's going to take for it to stop. And so it's not going to cut over. So what they had to do is they had to put more aggressive driving algorithms into the car, because what was happening is that the efficiency time went away. And they said, this was the article, they said, once a certain percentage of people are all driverless cars, we'll take that algorithm in. Because if they know that there's another driverless car next to them because they talk to each other, then they'll move in lockstep. Like a school of fish. So that, as I see, the only way to change that is that we're gonna have to, like, you'd have to revamp the entirety of driving. Because that natural honor makes us discourteous, makes us hyper-focused on getting to A to B. And then not only that, there's a sense of possession, like we own the roads. How dare you cut me off? I was like, wait, they just pulled like 20 feet in front of you. I've seen it where people are like, are you trying to get over? You can't get over. You can't get over. You can't get over. You have your signal on? No, you can't get over. Don't get in my lane. This is my lane. And then they get mad and they do something aggressive because you're like, I have to get this I-20 west. I have to go on the west side side. And even though it was as safe as you could possibly make it, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we got in line. And it's like, everyone was just trying to do the best they can, but you were matching me no matter what speed I went.
Yeah.
Right?
I would say that everybody drives like an asshole, which means that I have to drive like an asshole in Atlanta. Because you can't get anywhere. It's terrible.
So the catch there is then how do you then make it not necessarily like completely let it go? How do you let a sliver of it go? Like what was that Dharma just Swami gave Dharma? Bless you, asshole.
Bless you.
So like she's like, you can still call him an asshole, but you're gonna bless him. Dharma was like, and he did it. He did the practice, and then he did say that there was a lessening of his rage, his own personal rage while driving, because he dedicated some portion of it, bless you, asshole, to someone else, not his ego driving the whole thing. Then she had him like stick like a Ganesh in the car, and then she had to pay the ton of money. Lisa, it was all this whole thing where now his car became a temple. You're not going to stand in the middle of the temple and go, fuck you, God. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to do that. So, and while he said it never went away, he lessened it to the point where it wasn't negatively impacting him. And that was the whole point, was that his rage and his frustration was costing him because he was too entrained. His senses had been entrained. He had done it a million times. He had trained himself to yell at people. He had trained himself to set the women, right? And it can't change. Like, for example, I went through a period of time where I was making my friends feel unsafe driving. And they repeatedly brought it up. She was involved in this. and it just kind of kept getting brought up, and it kept getting brought up, and it kept getting brought up. And then the question became, what am I trying to accomplish? Because if we get to A and B and we're all frazzled and wrecked because Rishi is not paying attention on how to take care of the occupants, then who cares? We got there super stressed. But if we get there and my primary intention is to provide the safest drive possible for the people driving, then we all get there stress free. And so I think that the intention behind it, that's what really talking is about. What is the intention behind it? What are the senses? The senses are trying to take you to one place. Is there a way to take that and redirect it to another place? can we give our senses, our tastes, our experiences to God, or God is the Lord, right?
We talk more about the will.
About the what?
Will.
Oh, yeah, because he says here, and more powerful than mind is the will, or your intellect, of that which is above all. So this is a little tricky. Because what he's talking about is he's talking about your booty nature. He's talking about the sliver of you that is sacred inside of you. So in many traditions, but the yoga tradition says that there's a cosmic intelligence, and then there's a sliver of that we call the mahat. There's a sliver of that cosmic intelligence called the buddhi or bodhi intellect inside of you. And like a bumper car, you have connectivity back to the great grid of the mahat through your individual self, but only if the sense is quiet. So you can only find it, they say, through either moving or still meditation. So people who get in the zone, like they're playing tennis, like they're professional athletes, or music or art or something like that, when they get in the zone, they are touching on the buddhi intellect. And that's usually when they're the most creative, because instead of connecting to just the self, they're connecting to the self. So it's a little misleading because they're not asking you to draw on your willpower. Doesn't say willpower. They're asking you to draw on your divine nature. And the only way to get to that is basically daily spiritual practice. Because that, what happens is that meditation and that practice removes the delusions of the senses. Let me repeat that one more time. Daily practice removes the delusion of the senses.
You said will is what?
It's the buddhi.
And what way?
It's the sliver of the sacred inside of you.
There's the illusions.
It removes the delusion of the senses. The illusion of the senses also works, but it's really the delusion. Delusion. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about chapter 4, and then we're going to do a meditation for our close. Does that work?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I thought that's to keep the sword.
Sure. I've got several. Oh yeah, that one actually is really cool. We got that from the Renaissance Festival, and the gentleman like did a wood acid etching in order to get that whole like blue color. And it's just awesome. He had a purple one, and it got sold right in front of me. All right, so chapter 4, just to be aware, is that Krishna is going to talk about, information that he imparted to the original Lord of the sky, Vivasada. And it says, what's happening here is that he's now revealing that he's not just a Sutta, right? He's basically talking, saying, look, you and I, Arjuna, we have been through so much together, right? And you don't even know how many lives. I'm infinite, right? You're not really a body, it doesn't matter which path you choose, because all paths ultimately will lead to me. Kind of what we were talking about earlier. We were like, well, if I make the choice, I'm still in alignment with who I am, even though I've gone in this place. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Remember, within the river, you can still have decisions to make, but you still are on a river from that perspective. And then some people talk, and then he talks about how the different people approach divinity. And then it switches it and says, let's talk about action and inaction again. People are confused about it. To truly understand it, you must first of all know what action is, what inaction is, and what kind of actions to avoid. So I'm gonna let you read the rest of it, but it basically talks about how do you do a selfless action? How do you do that? And he teaches it right there in chapter 4. Questions? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I was thinking, how we speak a language, it's not ours, we don't own the language. thoughts that we think, ideas that we have, none of it's really ours. It's all like inspired or connected by to something else. And just thinking of like selfless action. I mean, isn't all of it selfless in a way? It's all interbeing, like Thich Nhat Hanh says. It's just like perspective. It's just the perspective is different.
And I think the distinction to make there is that when I was doom scrolling through the phone, I lost my ability to choose somehow. I made the first choice, but I somehow lost all of the other choices. How many times have we been in a space where we made our first choice? You know, I'm going to eat that one potato chip, and then the bag is gone.
No, that's a lie.
She said that's a lie. Like how many times have we made one choice, and what happens is that the senses immediately grab you, and you are locked down with no choice, seemingly no choice, during that entire time period. It's like you wake up, it's like you've had a blackout. Like, oh my God, what the hell am I? What just happened? And it's like, it happens to us all the time. It's like, you know, our parents, by the way, if we have any like conflict with them, or our siblings, know exactly where to touch us, and we instantly react. And it can be a series of, how dare you say that to, you know, it's like, well, hold on. That's not even true anymore. And we're like 50 years old. So let's just move on. You know, and it's like, but the button's still there, right? The button is still there. So Gungadhar, I think somewhere what we're talking about is that space where you go unconscious, where you don't have the ability to choose. And while you could argue that ultimately all those actions are in alignment with the divine, that just means that we're on the river. Are we in the rapids, or are we in the smoother part of the river? It doesn't change the fact that you're right. We are in alignment with our Dharma, no matter where we are. But are we trying to fight the river? Are we purposely going into the roughest part of the river, or are we going into the smoothest part of the river? And are we doing it intentionally? Or are we just being subject to life's winds? Now, there's a difference between if you were truly surrendered and you believed in the divine as the most holy aspect, and you were like, I'm just going to let the river take me, then why did the divine give you a body? Why did they give you choice? It wasn't actually the way that we were meant to live. I'm not saying, like I met a friend the other day, I said, how do you do your budgeting? He says, I do a completely intuitive spiritual budgeting. I was like, do you keep a budget? He's like, no, I don't keep a budget. I was like, he's one of the wealthiest people I know, like in terms of how he manages his money. I'm like, so then how do you do that? He said, well, it pops in my head and I go do it. I was like, I was like, Louis, how do you think that works? He's like, well, I believe that there's a Lord of wealth. I was like, you believe that there's a divinity helping you do this, and he just devotes his money to that. I was like, oh, well, that makes sense to me. If you were just over there like winging it, I'd be like, what's going on? How could you possibly pull this up? But he's not winging. He actually believes shamanically that there's this like entity helping him manage his money, and he interacts with this entity regularly. And I'm like, not for me, but I appreciate that. And that's how he does it. So, you know, we want to be careful about attributing any actions right or wrong. They're all divine actions, right? But what we're looking for is that, are there actions that are more in line with the outcomes that we're looking for, or are there actions that are less in line with the outcomes that we're looking for? All of them are divine. But one gives us a certain measure of more alignment with our Dharma, and one gives us less alignment with our Dharma. So if you're going down the river and you're trying to paddle upstream while the river's trying to take you downstream, you are fighting your Dharma. And so, into that sense, Gungadhar, you're totally right. Everything can be attributed to spiritual, to the divine. And so this is more about how you align with that spirituality, and less about, like, is it sacred? It's all sacred. But are you fighting it? Are you distracted and you've gone numb? Are you completely unintentional? Or are you awakened, paddling the way you want to, going in the portions of the stream that are of interest to you, chasing the whole thing down? Because you're right, you can't get it wrong. And so the idea is, if it's wrong and right doesn't apply, then all we're looking for is there more alignment, more joy, more of the things you're looking for, depending on what you value on who you are. Some people want comfort and safety, some people want joy, some people want excitement. It just depends on what the way they want. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
That actually is a very cool thing that you think of. I always feel like not punished, I'm like, I'm 23 and I go to bed at like 10 and I wake up at 8 and I don't do anything or anything, but that makes me feel less like, sometimes I'm like, why do I feel punished if like that's what I want to do? But I'm like, maybe I can't like want to do all those certain stuff, but like that puts that into perspective a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, if that's the way you're wired, why wouldn't we just love that?
Yeah.
Why don't we just love that? You know, love that this is the way you're wired, and this is what you choose to do, and this is what you want, and you feel satiated with it. What more do you need?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think society tries to trick us into thinking we need to do a whole lot more than we need to do.
Capitalism.
Yeah.
That was a big piece.
Other questions? Okay, all right, let's do the chocolate now. Okay, this does not require you to know the names of anything. So let's put the number of seated position. Oh, I do have to show you this though first. So there's a mudra for this called the mudra of the inner self. I don't remember the Sanskrit name for this. What you're going to do is you're going to place the tips of your fingers together, including your thumbs. But what's going to happen is that it looks like it's going to be a pranam, and what it's actually going to be is you're actually going to touch your thumbs to your pinkies while keeping everything touching. Yep. So it looks like this.
Okay.
Right? This is the mudra in itself. So you should see a triangle up at the top. I use my nose. You should see a triangle up at the top. Right? So think of it this way. Everything comes together like a pranam, and you're going to push the thumbs towards the, how do you do? Push the thumbs towards the pinkies. Right? And all your other fingers are going to be touching. So you're going to end up with a triangle, right? A triangle right there. And you're going to end up with like little eye holes, and there's a space in between. What you're trying to do is the thumbs create a road towards the pinkies. This is the mudra of the inner self. This is in a book somewhere. Mudras, I think it's called. So what you're going to do is you're going to bring this up in front of your third eye. And keep your gaze light, just allow it to become drishti, right? Thumbs are touching towards the pinkies. Now, when you feel like closing your eyes, you're going to close your eyes. For no requirement. And you're going to keep your eyes here and bring your attention down to the root chakra, right beneath the sit bones, Muladhara. You're going to breathe. And as you breathe out, you're going to let go of anything with your physical body that you want to release. Every breath out, you're going to inhale. Looking through the pyramid of light, you're going to exhale, release anything physical, pain, tightness, worry, concern, fear, anything around the physical body. Breathe in. Raise your focus to the middle of the pelvis, coming to Svadhisthana, second chakra. As you breathe out here, you're going to let go of emotion. Anything that doesn't serve you, breathe it out. Take a deep breath in. Raising the focus up to the spleen and the solar plexus. Exhale and breathe out anything that has you helpless, powerless, lack of discipline, lack of will, anything that you feel is gaps when it comes to power and choice. And Lord God. Breathing out. Breathing in. Coming up to Anahata, into the heart chakra, the center of the chest. Breathing out anything that has you resisting or fearing love or connection. Surrendering your resistance to love and connection. Releasing. Let it go. Inhale deeply. Coming up to the fifth chakra, into Vishuddha. Breathing out anything that blocks your voice, your expression, your creativity. Letting it release. Breathing out. Breathing in, inhaling and raising your focus up to the center of the skull, coming into Ajna. Breathing out any illusion, any self-deceptions, any lies that you tell yourself. Removing illusion. Last but not least, inhale in. Moving from Ajna, the Sahasrara, to the Brahmarandra at the top of the head. Exhale and breathe out. Surrender anything that blocks you from connecting to the spirit, to the divine, to whatever you label. God, goddess, divinity, it doesn't matter. Breathe out any blocks. Your next exhale, softly lower the hands down to the knees. And inhale, bring your focus back to Anahata at the heart. And anything that's left, anything you wish to release, exhale. Inhale again, drawing against all the chakras. Exhale, release. One more time. Pull it in, pull it in, pull in anything that you wish to let go of, anything that doesn't serve you, and surrender it, release it. Exhale. The body relax. Okay. When you're ready, slowly open your eyes, come back into the room. Okay. To close, we're going to do Om Shrim Krim Krim Krishna Swaha. Let's do it one very focused time. And then we can answer any questions afterwards. All right. Take a deep breath in with me. Om Shrim Krim Krim Krishna Swaha. All right. Thank you for a fun and amazing class. I'm just gonna warn you, there's gonna be triple the props next time. Just so you're aware. What's that? Okay, perfect. I'll take it. I'll make sure he gets back to you.
Now I can just imagine all the Gita characters, but it's like Street Fighter from there.
Exactly. They're like waiting, you know, okay. Thunderdart, thank you so much for joining us both this time and the last time. I know you were in transition, so it's very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, good to see you. Thanks so much. That was a lot of fun. I love it.
Awesome. Can't wait till next time. We'll see you guys. Actually, I think we'll see you next week, right?
Next week.
Yeah. I'll confirm. I gotta go. All right, y'all. Take care.
So.
Bye. I'll see you soon.
Because I literally just